I've got a very important interview here. Only a few days ago on one of my videos, a certain gentleman here in Melbourne, outskirts of Melbourne, made a comment regards his parents, mother and father, who are in an aged care home and who have had the 2 doses of let's just say the Vaseline. The results of, when I say the results, what happened in the day, virtually the day after, or on that day after the 2nd dose, is quite frightening. And I just want this person to tell his story, and this has to be passed on to everyone. This is not made up. I've got evidence here with the letters that I'll read out, and right there, I want to welcome you. I'll call you Mr. H as anonymous. How are you, Mr. H?
Thanks, Peekay. I'm okay.
Okay. Yeah, well, just right from the start, short few words about yourself and your parents in their movements in the last, say, 2 or 3 months. You told me they did live in Melbourne, but they've moved to Adelaide, and the reasons for that. So, yeah, tell us about it.
Okay, mate. Look, I'm mid-50s. I was born in the UK. I came to Australia in the early 70s, so I saw the halcyon days of Sydney. Grew up on the northern beaches, which was just beautiful. Moved to Melbourne about 4 years ago to look after my parents. They were becoming elderly. My brother had just moved from Melbourne to Adelaide, so they needed someone to do some of the heavier stuff around the house and some of the cooking and that sort of thing. So I moved down to Melbourne. Now I have a fairly complex family interaction with my brother and sister, and they're not the easiest people to deal with. I guess I'm not the easiest person to deal with, but the long and the short of it is, after I'd been here for a year, they decided, well, my father was losing his ability to make decisions, so was my mother, so they appointed my brother as an enduring power of attorney, and he decided that the best move was to take my parents from the home that they'd not grown up in, but grown old in and wanted to stay in, to a care facility in Adelaide. Once my father became too ill for the semi-supported care facility, they had their own rooms, but their meals were cooked for them, and needed more support, they were taken to a higher level of care facility in November last year, where they are currently both resident.
So, Mr. H, your parents are in a home in Adelaide. So when were you aware that they actually took the vaccine, and did you actually, you told me you visited them in May, was it, or April? Or?
Okay. First and foremost, I am not a part of the medical decision-making for my parents. That's handled by my brother and sister. And I expressed to them that I didn't want my parents to get any sort of medication that might be running around at the moment. Well, we know what we're talking about. And I'm very much cut out of the medical decisions. So we ended up arranging to visit my father for his birthday on the 13th of May. So myself and my wife arrived in Adelaide, only to be greeted as we walked into the aged care facility with big signs everywhere saying that they were having the jab on the next day. So when I talked to my parents' registered nurse, she said, yes, well, they have to be vaccinated because your brother has decided that's the right path for them, and they will be getting their second jabs on tomorrow, on the 14th, which was the next day.
Just hang on. Just hang on there. So you weren't aware when you arrived there that your parents had actually been jabbed?
No.
So your brother was aware of this?
Yeah, he signed the consent form.
So
they couldn't have done it without my brother's written consent.
So
jab both my parents.
Okay, so your brother was hiding this from you. Did you actually have a conversation with your brother about the vaccines for your parents that you weren't happy to have it?
I talked to them, I emailed them in March. We had a bit of a confab about Dad's health in March, and I said I didn't want either of my parents vaccinated. And I said that to both my brother and sister. However, they just seemed to have ignored that and gone ahead and got them to get the jab as well. My brother is very afraid of COVID. In fact, he said to me, I wouldn't even, when I said my mum should come visit me in Melbourne, just put her on a plane, I wouldn't let any of my family fly there, just death traps with the COVID and da-da-da-da-da. So he seems to be particularly paranoid about the lurgy that's going around.
You mentioned your sister. Your sister's in Melbourne?
My sister is in Sandringham, correct?
Okay.
So she was actually suffering she has suffered a slightly harsher lockdown. I'm on the outskirts of Melbourne, so I'm classed as semi-rural, so I haven't had quite as bad a time as you guys have had in Melbourne City.
Okay. And so she's with your brother on the COVID?
My brother has enduring power of attorney over my father completely, and has a 50% over my mother, and my sister has 50% of my mother's an enduring power of attorney.
Okay, so
he has the majority, he has the decision.
So you're fighting a tough battle against your siblings. Okay.
It's not easy.
So you say you arrived there on the 12th of May, correct?
We got in late on the 12th. The family was visiting from interstate, so we decided to give them a little bit of space. We didn't get in till late on the 12th, so we set up and we had a couple of quiet beers and a nice quiet night on the 12th, and the first time we got to see them was around lunchtime, around 12 o'clock on the 13th.
And how were they, health-wise?
Health-wise, I mean, Dad has been deteriorating for a while. I wouldn't have said he was in anything but, the last year of his life. Mum seemed quite bright, quite chirpy. Because of COVID, they weren't being allowed out of the facility with anyone but family. My father isn't really that mobile, so she'd really been confined to the facility for 3 months. But she'd sort of wander around, having a bit of a dance and sing and a bit of fun. So Dad was
pretty good,
fair for someone who's around 89 years old, and Mum was active, although she is getting fairly senile these days.
Okay. So the 13th, correct me if I'm wrong, were you aware of the vaccine happening the next day? Or?
Well, first we became aware was when we wandered into the aged care facility and they had posters up everywhere, vaccine tomorrow, vaccine tomorrow, vaccine tomorrow.
So you're concerned, of course, probably couldn't sleep all night. So what happened the next day?
Next day on the 14th, we'd arranged to take my parents out. So the nursing staff very kindly offered to get them jabbed first thing in the morning. So didn't manage to get them out of getting the jab, didn't think we were, but there's always some hope, I guess. So we arrived at the facility to find my father in a state of pain, it was pain. The look on his face was pain. He seemed to be quite rigid, quite stiff. He certainly wasn't communicating well at all, and his level of communication is not particularly good at the moment anyway. But it was hard to even get a word out of him at that stage. Mum was fatigued, dopey, didn't feel like doing anything. Was really all she wanted to do was sort of stay in bed for an hour or two. So we thought, okay, let's leave them be, and we'll come back later on in the afternoon. So we let them have a rest for an hour or two, and we came back in the afternoon of the 14th, at which stage Mum was feeling better. So we spent some time with Mum. Dad was still not in a good way in any way, shape or form. He looked like he was in pain, and that concerned us greatly. So we did talk to both the doctors and the nursing staff about that.
Okay, so your mother, right there and then, you weren't aware about this leg pain that she's going to have?
Mum said she was feeling better than she had in the morning,
Yep.
And then that afternoon started complaining in pain in her lower left leg.
Okay. So how do you compare your parents the day before when you first met them as to the immediately after the jab?
The only thing I can give you is a reference, because I mean they're both not 100%. But if the 13th was the 100% benchmark, I would say Dad was about 50, maybe 60% as healthy as we'd seen him the day before he'd had the jab. Mum, probably 70%, because she was poor straight after the jab, and then got better in the not got better, but felt a little bit less unwell in the afternoon. So she's probably about 70%.
Okay. So are you aware when the first jab was taken?
My assumption, from what I can tell, is late in April, so about 3 weeks before the 14th.
So I know you weren't there, and obviously your brother would have told you, but straight after the first jab, there was no really side effects, do you think?
My brother and I don't talk. I'm absolutely horrified that my brother and sister would move my parents out of the house that they'd lived in for 15 years, that they wanted to stay in as long as they possibly could, and move them to a nursing home, and that's caused quite a bit of family ruction. So I don't really communicate with my brother and sister unless I have to. So I wasn't made aware of any adverse reactions that they might have had to the first vaccine. And to be honest with you, my mother probably wouldn't remember if she had an adverse reaction and if it was to do after the vaccine. And Dad has a little bit of problem communicating new sorts of information like that.
Okay, so seeing him on the 13th for 3 weeks, you'd think there was no real concern health-wise in that 3-week period, and the second dose was the actual, I would use the word killer. Would you agree with that?
The second dose, in my opinion, was certainly very detrimental to both of them, on the day and on the day after. On the day after, interestingly, the 15th, we went back to the hospital, not the hospital, to the home, I should say, and my father was feeling a little bit better. He could communicate, do that sort of stuff. But all Mum wanted to do, and she just said, I just am exhausted, I'm fatigued, I feel terrible, all I want to do is sleep, leave me to sleep. So we left Mum very much to sleep, and then spent time with Dad. However, it had occurred to us whilst we were away on the 14th that the lower leg pain Mum was having may be something to do with a blood clotting disorder. As we know, they are associated with some of the medications that they'd received the day before. So we told 2 of the nursing staff and the doctor on call that we were particularly concerned about blood clots in my mother's left leg.
Right there and then, were you actually told that she's got blood clots? Was it tested?
No.
No, okay.
No, we were there, and the 15th was a Saturday, and we were there we got there late on the 12th, as I said, saw them the 13th, 14th, 15th, then left on the 16th, which was a Sunday. So really, we informed the medical staff that we were concerned about blood clots. However, to my knowledge, no testing was done on that day. What happened subsequent to that, I'm not sure. But we certainly told them to be very on guard, and we were concerned about my father's reaction to the jab, and to be very on guard for my mother as far as blood clotting in her left leg went.
So, Mr. H, I don't think there's a coincidence that these terrible things have happened to not just your dad, but your mother within an hour of the second jab. Do you agree?
I agree.
Yeah, it's terrible. And so, okay, that was you were left home to go back home on the 16th, which was a Monday. So what happened after that? Any contact with your parents? When was the next contact?
16th was actually a Sunday.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I just checked my phone logs, and I made a phone call on the 19th of May, just to say hi, see how things were going. To be honest with you, I thought the blood clot warning would have been enough for the doctor. So I don't remember talking to Mum about how a leg was on that particular phone call, but I've phoned them once since then. And then normally I'd phone about once every 2 weeks, and then I got a phone call on the 30th of May at about 9:40 at night, which is very strange for my brother to be calling me at any stage, let alone at almost 10 o'clock at night, to say Mum was currently being loaded into an ambulance and being taken to Royal Adelaide Hospital because they suspected that she had clotting in her left leg.
They suspected. So the staff at the aged care suspected it and notified the ambulance, or what?
Well, obviously she was in a lot of pain, and they've decided to call an ambulance and take her off to hospital.
Okay, so the major concern now is your mum. Any idea how your dad was at this time?
I've spoken to him a little bit, and physically I don't know if the effects that he was feeling mitigated at all, but no, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. I haven't seen him for a while, and he's hard to talk to on the phone.
Okay, so what happened after that?
She was taken to hospital. I was given a phone call on the 31st, and my brother said she has blood clots in her left leg. There is a degree of dead tissue in her leg, which they're particularly worried about, and quite a few of the blood vessels in the leg are blocked, so they were going to attempt revascularization, which was pretty scary, and the option was going to be either they get that to work or they were going to have to amputate the leg above the knee.
You're joking, that's horrible. That's not much of an option. So your brother is contacting you here all of a sudden. How do you find that?
Well, my brother was contacting me because he realised that it was a very serious circumstance, and I think he was able to put aside his petty jealousies and petty grievances to let me know that my mother was gravely ill.
So obviously you're concerned big time, and you want to go back to Adelaide, don't you?
I do.
So what's happening now in Adelaide regards COVID, and tell us, is that the first, okay, you want to go back to Adelaide, but was there any reporting to the Therapeutic Goods Administration regards adverse events? Did you contact them?
Okay. Firstly, Peekay, they didn't decide to take her leg until I think the 1st of June. They ran some more tests. They found out that her leg was basically dead from the knee down, so they had a choice, and the choice was given: either leave the leg on, in which case it will become gangrenous and your mother will die within a week, or we have to amputate the leg above the knee. So the next day she went in for emergency surgery and had the left leg taken above the knee.
And your brother obviously decided that was the option.
My brother and sister both have conservatorship of my parents' medical decisions, so that was their decision. And for the one time that I was glad not to be involved in the decision-making process was then, because I really, that would have been a horrible decision.
Would have been horrible, exactly. So she's had her leg amputated. So go back again. Did your brother call you after the operation, or what happened, or what were you doing?
He did. To his credit, he was a little bit more communicative. He gave us some feedback. He let me talk to my mother on the phone, albeit with him in the room, which I always find a little bit disquieting, disconcerting. But he was a little bit more cooperative then.
All right, so what were your next steps?
I was absolutely livid about them getting the jabs, and I was livid about the home in the way that they ignored our clear instruction that we thought perhaps my mother had blood clots. So I contacted the TGA to lodge an adverse vaccine event report, and I also contacted Channel 10 to try and get some media coverage.
Just before you get on to Channel 10, I've actually got the report here, Mr. H.
Yeah.
And I'll quickly go through it. As you can see, I've taken your name off. It's from the Australian Government, Department of Health, TGA. Dear Sir, Madam, TGA reference. It actually says the drug AstraZeneca. And before I keep reading, are you aware which drug this was?
Look, as I said, I'm somewhat sequestered from the decision-making, the medical decision-making process, but I'm led to believe that they both had the Pfizer jabs because of the distancing between the two, the 3 weeks, and I believe AstraZeneca is 12 weeks.
Exactly, but we were told at this time that it was AstraZeneca that had all these blood clots, and that's why they changed the age. Anyone under 60, they changed. They said 50s to 60s no good because everyone was getting blood clots, or that said 12 people. So it's very strange that in May that your parents would receive the Pfizer when anyone over 50 was told to get the AstraZeneca. But that's another issue. I don't want to go into that. But so you believe it's the Pfizer, obviously because of the 3 week gap, and the AstraZeneca, like you said, is 8 weeks. So I'll quickly go through it. Thank you for submitting your adverse event report, which was entered into the Therapeutic Goods Administration Adverse Event Management System, AEMS, on the 3rd of June. Okay, that's when you said you actually, you called them or whatever, contacted them the day before or first, whatever.
I think I contacted them the day before.
Okay.
So, yeah.
If you submit any further information, please quote, blah, 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 this will lessen the possibility of duplication. And it goes on about garbage here. Do you believe that they actually recorded your mum's adverse effect in their statistics, in their data?
I do not believe they recorded it as an adverse reaction to the jab.
That'd be right, and I'm not sure if there's any way you can check that. I'm sure if you go in there, they're not going to give your mum's name or anything. So obviously this, your case and how many other cases like this that aren't being reported. So let's just go back. Okay. And that's the last you heard from them, and you didn't contact them after this letter?
Last I've heard, I become somewhat frustrated by the sort of brick wall that you sort of hit. And because I'm not my parents' enduring power of attorney, I don't know how much information I will actually get out of the government department regarding them or my report.
Okay. Now let's go to Channel 10. You started on Channel 10. When did you contact them?
The 2nd of June.
Well, tell us about that experience.
Contacted a lady by the name of Beth Excel, I think her surname is. Let me just check that for you.
Yeah.
Beth Excel. And I had a phone conversation with her. She sent me an email, which I'll quickly read to you. Thanks for the call just now. I'm so sorry it's under these circumstances. Please see below a Zoom link for our 1 p.m. time. We'd arranged an interview. If you click the link, Zoom meeting, Channel 10 Adelaide.
Okay. So did that go through?
So we made a time and date, 1 o'clock on the 3rd to chat.
Right.
1 o'clock on the 2nd to chat, I'm sorry. So I waited dutifully by the phone and by the computer at 1 o'clock, and nothing happened. 1:20, nothing happened. So I phoned Channel 10, I phoned Beth and said, what's happening? She said, oh, look, I'm just waiting for South Australia Health to confirm that your mother is actually in Royal Adelaide Hospital.
Yeah, right.
At which stage I sent one of the letters that the vascular and endovascular surgery unit had sent us to try and get us an exemption to get across the border.
I'll show that. I'll actually show that now. Just hang on a second. Okay, I've got the letter here, but keep going.
So as I said, I sent her the letter to prove that my mother was actually in Royal Adelaide Hospital. Still crickets, still nothing. So then I phoned her again, and I got another email back from her. Thanks, Greg. Just bear with me. I'm here waiting for South Australia Health. So I emailed her back. So why the hold up? If you phone the Royal Adelaide Hospital and ask for Mrs. H in room, they will confirm. So she had the letter stating that she was in hospital to have her leg amputated. She also had a room number, and I gave, well, the Royal Adelaide Hospital's on the Hard Hospital phone number to find. So they could have phoned her room, they could have contacted the hospital. I see no reason why SA Health wouldn't confirm that they had a patient there by that name.
Oh, just correct me if I'm wrong. Is this the letter from the vascular and endovascular surgery?
Yeah, I sent her the letter to back up my story to say, hey, look, there's the letter, there's the room number, what's the whole come talk to me.
We'll get to this letter in a minute, because you actually sent it to get a exemption to come into Adelaide as well, didn't you?
Correct.
All right, we'll get that in a minute. So, Channel 10 never happened, correct?
Never happened. Phoned, emailed, and just it seemed to go completely off the boil. So at that point, I must admit, I thought the fix is in. I don't think this is going to be reported as an adverse event in the vaccine system. I don't think I'm going to get any coverage of this, even though she seemed really keen when we first talked. I don't think I'm going to get any coverage of this in the mainstream media. So I've turned to the alternate media, such as yourself, to try and get the story out.
Oh, cool. So obviously management at Channel 10 didn't like the idea putting out a story that the second jab of whatever, Pfizer or Pfizer or AstraZeneca, within hours has virtually nearly taken the life of your mother, and within days has had her leg amputated. Do you think that's a huge possibility, that they just panicked and says, no, we can't have this made public on the airwaves?
If you're asking me for an opinion on the mainstream media, I think they are colluding with the powers that be to try and minimise any vaccine injuries that they see and maximise any COVID, if you can call it a disease, maximise any impact that COVID is having. So, yeah, I believe they're covering it up.
Yeah, mate, I could say this at the end of this interview, but if any person watching this video, listening to Mr. H and what's happened to the mother, and knowing it's not a coincidence that this happened straight after the second jab of whatever, like, we don't know which one it was, but probably both would have the same effect. It's not going to happen to everyone, but there's a huge chance it could happen to you. You would not go anywhere near the jab, and of course that's the last thing the media and the government want. Okay, so Channel 10 was a dead loss. We could have expected that. Okay, now you're very, very concerned, and you want to get back to Adelaide to see your parents, especially your mother. So what's happening now?
So we asked the hospital for a letter so that I can apply for an exemption for a border pass for my wife and myself, so we can go back and be with Mum. I mean, at one stage they'd scheduled the operation for the 3rd, so our hope was to get there for the 3rd, but they had to put it forward because it was so serious. So we still wanted to go and see her, so we put these particular letters in for a border exemption.
Okay, just stop there. Obviously, this was done before Channel 10 because you used this letter for Channel 10, correct?
The first letter, yes.
Okay, I've got it here in front of me. I'll just quickly go through it. It's from the vascular and endovascular surgery. I'll skip all that. I've taken her name out. Is an 82-year-old lady currently admitted in the Royal Adelaide Hospital under the vascular surgical unit. She is suffering from chronic limb, can't say the word, ischemia. What is it?
Ischemia.
Ischemia of the left leg, and has had a failed, here's another big one,
revascularization.
That's it. So you've gone through that, and that it said failed, exactly. Management options from this point on include an above-the-knee amputation or end-of-life cares. Two pretty ordinary options, I must admit. Her enduring power of attorney, that's you? No, that's a sister. That's a sister. It says he's currently in Melbourne.
It's my brother has enduring power of attorney over my father.
Oh, and your sister.
My brother has half an enduring power of attorney, and my sister, who is based in Melbourne, also has half of an enduring power of attorney for her.
Okay. The vascular unit is kindly requesting an exemption to the current cross-border restrictions between Victoria and South Australia, so her EPO, which is a sister, this is obviously for your sister, may assist in determining complex decisions. I've actually got her name, Mrs. Hall. Does that worry you?
No.
All right. Sorry, I didn't realise that was there. Mrs. Hall's healthcare in Adelaide. Kind regards, blah, blah, blah. So this letter, even though you requested it, it's basically saying they want your sister to come.
The letter was designed by my brother and sister to try and get my sister across the board.
Okay, she wanted to come.
No regard for myself and my wife, so I actually had to phone the vascular unit and ask them to redo the letter, and they've actually sent another letter through with both myself and my wife on it.
And I've got that letter. I've got the letter, I'll read it. But so you sent this to where to get an exemption to come in?
I believe the exemptions are handled by South Australian Police, SA Pol.
And they knocked you back?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because it didn't meet their criteria, which is it's got to be guaranteed that the person is going to die within 2 weeks.
Oh, really?
And I can't imagine a situation where the hospital is going to perform an above-the-knee amputation and then could write a letter that would say, and we expect you to die within 2 weeks.
Ridiculous, yeah.
If they'd have left the leg on, it would have been probably granted because it would have been guaranteed that she'd die because she only had the amputation.
Yep.
It wasn't guaranteed that she was going to die, so they decided that it was okay for me to stay. And I'm not even in Melbourne. I'm in semi-rural Melbourne, no cases around here. Semi-rural Victoria, no cases around here. No, nothing.
So this was obviously during the 3-week or whatever lockdown period in Melbourne, even though Adelaide had nothing going there. But all right, so they knocked you back, and let me just get this other letter. Hang on. Okay, I've got it here. I'll just quickly read it out. Try to make this a bit bigger so people can see it while I'm doing this. Here we go. Same thing, vascular. 2nd of June. To whom it may concern regarding your mother. Oh, it's got her address. Oh, geez. Does that worry you?
Not particularly.
All right, look. That's her address, don't worry about it. This is to verify that Mrs. H is gravely ill at the Royal Adelaide Hospital, admitted under the vascular surgery team. She is suffering from chronic limb ischemia, same thing, and has failed revascularization. She will undergo an above-the-knee amputation on Wednesday, virtually that day, 2nd of June. Due to Mrs. H's age and frailty, it is a procedure that poses serious risk to well-being. It would be beneficial for Mrs. H to be surrounded and supported by family and provide her with a chance to say goodbye should the situation deteriorate. Family members that are currently in Victoria are son, which is you, I've blacked it out, and your wife, which is the daughter-in-law, signed by whatever. So, if anyone, in politics or whatever who's running the show in South Australia can't show some empathy, it clearly states that, it should have the family there to support the last days. There's a huge chance that she's going to die. But so you sent that letter over, and what happened then?
No, denied. Even got in contact with a local member for the electorate that my parents lived in. Talked to someone in the office, and they seemed to be very positive about helping me push this particular exemption through. And then when it was declined, it was like, oh, well, such is life.
Wow. So, you must be obviously, I don't know, tell me what your feelings were right here and now. I mean, how were you feeling at this stage?
I'm obviously very upset about my mother's leg.
Obviously.
Until you've been put in the situation, it's very, very difficult. But the number one emotion that I feel at the moment is absolute rage against this system of control and system of just putting people into situations that they shouldn't have to be in, not being able to see my dying father, not being able to see my mother before she has a major operation, not being able to travel freely, not being able to have friends over. I'm just absolutely enraged at the system because it is not doing what they say it's doing. It's about control.
And we all feel the same way. And as you know, there's one death in the last 6 months here in Australia, and even that death you wouldn't even say it was real. But okay, sorry.
It was acquired overseas to my returning traveller who got it overseas.
Yeah,
so
supposedly.
No, not one person has contracted COVID in Australia in 2021 and passed away.
And yet, at the same time, 70,000 people have died in Australia from other, diseases or whatever conditions. But no one talks about that. But anyway, that's digress. So this is the 2nd of June. You've been in contact with your parents since. Just before that, even if you had gone there, I think the rules would have been that you would have had to quarantine for 14 days. Is that...
Okay. My mother was at Royal Adelaide Hospital. My father was still at the care home, both of which are nearing the end of their life. My father was more before my mum had her problems. If I'd have gone there, I might have been able to see Mum. I might have had to have worn full PPE. But even if I'd have seen my mother, they wouldn't have let me see my father, who is probably 10 kilometres away from where my mother was. So it's absolutely disgusting that you can't get across the border, you can't get to see your family, you can't get to see your loved ones. I've been robbed of so much time. I had to cancel flights in February. We were due to go and see them in February because the border was closed. Couldn't get to see them in May because June, the border was closed. It's just disgusting.
So you were driving to Adelaide from Melbourne, 7.5, 8-hour drive?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you had the exemption, or even if you didn't have the exemption, what stopped you from driving? They're like border patrols?
Big guys with guns at the border stopping everyone, asking them for their passes. At that stage, they had more manned border checkpoints, to my understanding.
Okay.
And the last thing I wanted to be doing in my state of mind at that point in time was having a disagreement with an armed police force, because I'm a pretty big guy and it wouldn't have taken much for them to go, oh my God, he's a threat. And So,
okay. Like you said, if you did get an exemption, which you didn't, and you drove in, you would have had to proven that at the border, but then that probably would have sent you somewhere to quarantine for 14 days, most likely.
Probably. I'm really not 100% sure of the procedure after we cross the border, but whatever it is, it's stupid.
Okay. All right, Mr. H, we've gone on longer than I thought we would. Obviously, this is a grave concern, not just for you, but everyone else, that this could happen to anyone else, not only to the elderly, this could happen to anyone. The adverse effects that we're not being told about. Just sum it up in a few words, your feelings, and any advice to anyone else that could be in your same situation.
Words of advice: look, if you've got elderly parents and you're even considering putting them in a home, realise you lose control of what they do and say, what they do, for the simple fact that the home can go, no, we have a health directive, you're not allowed to see your mother, you're not allowed to see your father, you can't come in here. And if I'd have presented to the home without the correct paperwork, they would have just refused me entry, and if I'd have barged away, and I would have been under arrest. So please be very, very concerned about putting anyone into a home. We had issues with my father in March. They're trying to starve him to death by feeding him food that he doesn't enjoy eating, but it meets the nutritional quotas. So for my learning over the last 3 or 4 months has been, I don't think that nursing homes are there for the benefit of the people, but they're there to quietly do what they can within the rules, to try and hasten that particular person's drain on society by getting rid of them. It really is disgusting what they're doing. The staff are nice. The staff are very cooperative, but the rules that they operate within are designed to try and get rid of the useless eaters, in my opinion.
Well, I was going to ask you that. I 100% agree. They're not there at this stage with this, last 15, 16 months. I've had an experience at a nursing home in my suburb, not far from me, which was one of the highest supposedly cased nursing homes, only a small place, but it had the highest numbers. And I can tell you for sure that they're fully in on this, whether they're killing off the elderly or what is it, they sign, what's that agreement?
Non-resuscitation.
That's the word. That's it. The non-resuscitation.
I think it's called.
Meaning they virtually want to end their lives as quick as possible. Their concern isn't really for the people there. Their concern, it's a business to make money, and it is a big money-making scheme. The aged care centre here is run by Kerry Stokes. Kerry Stokes, Channel 7. What else can you say? It's all about making money. And okay, Mr. H, well, thank you for contacting me. Thank you for your time.
Okay, PK, before you go, mate.
Yeah, all right.
I just want to say one thing. I don't know anyone who's had COVID. I don't know.
Me neither.
In fact, of my friends. Sorry?
Me too. Go on.
And of my friends, a couple think they know that they've known people that might have had COVID. However, on the day that I found out the news my mother was losing her leg, I was obviously a little bit shell-shocked and needed to vent. So my ex-flatmate phoned me, and I told him the story, and he said, oh yeah, my uncle had the second shot, and he had 5 mini strokes, 1 major stroke. We're still not sure about the damage that he's sustained. And then I was talking to my cleaner who came later on that day, and she said, oh, I had an auntie that had a blood clot by the heart, and she died. So I don't know anyone who's had COVID, yet two of the people that I know very closely, and just happen to be the people that I talked to, mentioned vaccine injuries or injuries that they believed were to do with the vaccine to people that were very, very close to them. So I'm very sceptical on the statistics that are out there at the moment.
Look, I'm not here to tell anyone what to do, whether to take the V or not. That's your choice. You've heard this courageous man's story. It's a horrendous story. No one should deserve this. If it was me, I don't know how I could have spoken like he has. I tend to get very emotional. I know he's, probably taken it a bit better than I would. If this happened to my mother, oh, by God, I don't know how I'd be feeling. Yeah. I'd be absolutely horrified. And this has to get out. This has to get out to everyone. This can happen to anyone. This is not a coincidence that it happened an hour after the second jab. So we could go on forever, Mr. H, but thanks from the bottom of my heart for coming on. I'm going to put this video up, and let's just hope it doesn't get removed by the censorship monsters on YouTube. Yeah. So once again, send my heartfelt, sympathy to your mother and father, and let's just pray that, they still have some life left in them, and all the best to your family. All right? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. PK, thank you for what you do, mate, because the mainstream are ignoring this. The only way this is going to get out is by people like you and people like the listeners talking to people one-on-one if we have to. But the message is that important. We've just got to get it out. Just got to keep on it. Okay? Thank you so much, mate.
Thanks, mate. Cheers. Okay.
Cheers.
No worries. Okay. Bye-bye.